I think I didn't do anything wrong, just played a silly game. One kiss, everyone laughed, and it meant nothing. That's why I was so shocked when my husband served me divorce papers in front of our families, claiming I'd cheated. All over a dare and a misunderstanding, or at least, that's how I see it. It began on what should have been just another Friday night out with friends. Elliot and I had been married for 8 years, and honestly, things had gotten a bit routine. He'd come home from teaching his high school math classes, I'd wrap up my insurance claims work, and we'd settle into the same predictable evening patterns. Our daughter Lucy would do her homework while we made dinner, and weekends blended into each other without much excitement. That's why I was so looking forward to our night at the local gastropub with our usual crowd. Emma, Jordan, Tara, Greg, and Vince. Vince Callow had been Elliot's friend since college, and he lived just 2 streets over with his wife. He was always the charming one in our group, the kind of guy who could make everyone laugh and feel special. The evening started normally enough. We grabbed our usual corner table, ordered drinks, and fell into comfortable conversation. But I noticed Elliot seemed particularly withdrawn, barely participating in the banter that flowed around our table. When Emma suggested we play some party games to liven things up, his expression grew even more distant. "Come on, Elliot," I said, nudging his shoulder. "Don't be such a stick in the mud. We're supposed to be having fun." He gave me a look I couldn't quite read. "I just think we're getting a bit old for party games, don't you think?" The table went quiet for a moment, and I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment. Here I was, trying to inject some life into our social circle, and my own husband was shooting me down in front of everyone. "Speak for yourself," I laughed, trying to keep the mood light. "Some of us still know how to have a good time." Emma jumped in with a suggestion for truth or dare, and despite Elliot's obvious reluctance, the group enthusiastically agreed. The first few rounds were harmless enough. Jordan had to text his ex. Tara admitted to stalking her coworker's Instagram. Greg revealed his secret fear of butterflies. Everyone was laughing, the energy was building, and I felt alive in a way I hadn't in months. When it was my turn again, Vince was the one to pose the challenge. "Dare," I said without hesitation, feeling bold and playful. "I dare you to kiss the most attractive person at this table," he said with that trademark grin of his. The table erupted in whoops and laughter. I could feel Elliot tense beside me, but the alcohol and the group's energy carried me forward. Instead of kissing my husband, which would have been the safe, expected choice, I leaned across the table toward Vince. "Well," I said theatrically, "if I have to choose the most attractive." The kiss lasted maybe 5 seconds, but the reaction was immediate and electric. Our friends cheered and laughed. Someone took photos. Emma was practically falling off her chair with delight. It felt spontaneous and fun, and exactly like the kind of memory we'd all laugh about for years. Everyone except Elliot. I turned back to him with a big smile, expecting him to roll his eyes good-naturedly or make some joke about my dramatic flair. Instead, his face was completely pale, his jaw clenched tight. "Elliot, come on," I said, still laughing. "It was just a game. Don't be so serious." But he was already standing up, pulling his wallet from his pocket. "I'm going home." Not. The table fell silent, the festive mood suddenly awkward. I felt annoyed and embarrassed by his overreaction. "Really? You're going to storm off over a silly dare?" I called after him. But he was already walking away. Emma reached over and squeezed my hand. "Don't worry about it, Ro. He's just being oversensitive. You were just playing along." "Exactly," Vince added, though he looked slightly uncomfortable now. "It didn't mean anything. We were all just having fun." I stayed for another hour, but the mood never quite recovered. Our friends kept assuring me that Elliot was overreacting, that it was just harmless fun, that married couples should be secure enough to laugh off something so innocent. By the time I got home, I'd convinced myself they were right. Elliot was already in bed with the lights off when I got home. I assumed he'd sleep it off and we'd laugh about his jealous reaction in the morning. After all, it was just a game, just a dare, just 5 seconds of meaningless fun. I had no idea that those 5 seconds would end up costing me everything. The next morning, Elliot was already gone when I woke up. He'd left early for his Saturday tutoring sessions without saying goodbye, which wasn't entirely unusual, but something felt different. The house seemed colder somehow, more tense. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from my coworker, Janet. "Girl, saw your Instagram story from last night. You looked like you were having fun." Confused, I opened Instagram to check what she was referring to. Emma had posted several stories from our night out, including a video of the kiss. In the short clip, you could see me leaning across the table toward Vince. our friends cheering in the background, and Elliot's face, though it was partially cut off, looking strained and uncomfortable. The video had already gotten dozens of views and comments. Most were lighthearted, laughing emojis, comments about how fun our friend group looked, jokes about party games. But seeing it from this angle, I felt a small knot form in my stomach. It looked more intimate than I remembered, and Elliot's discomfort was more visible than I'd realized in the moment. When Elliot came home that afternoon, I was ready with an explanation. Look, I saw Emma's story, and I know it probably looked worse than it was. I began before he'd even set down his keys. But you know it was just a stupid dare, right? It didn't mean anything. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just looking at me. Rowena, do you have any idea how humiliating last night was for me? Humiliating? I felt my defenses rising. Elliot, it was 5 seconds. Everyone was laughing. It was just a game. It wasn't a game to me. His voice was quiet but firm. Watching my wife kiss my friend while everyone cheered and took pictures, that wasn't fun for me. That was degrading. I stared at him, genuinely confused by the intensity of his reaction. But you know I love you. You know it didn't mean anything. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Because it felt like a big deal to me, he said. And instead of acknowledging that, you're telling me my feelings are wrong. This conversation was going nowhere productive. I could see he was determined to be hurt and offended, no matter how much I explained that his reaction was disproportionate. Fine, I said. I'm sorry you felt bad, but I think you're being overly sensitive about something that was clearly just fun between friends. He looked at me for a long moment, then shook his head and walked upstairs without another word. Over the next few days, I found myself defending the incident repeatedly. My mother called after seeing the social media posts, and I had to explain that Elliot was just being jealous and insecure. My coworkers at the insurance office kept bringing it up, some joking about my wild night out, others asking if everything was okay at home. He's just going through a phase, I told them. You know how men can get when they feel threatened, but there's nothing to be threatened by. It was literally just a dare. Emma and our other friends were completely supportive, agreeing that Elliot was overreacting and that I'd done nothing wrong. When we met for coffee that Wednesday, they were full of reassurance. Honestly, Ro, if my husband got that bent out of shape over a party game, I'd be worried about his confidence, Emma said. You're allowed to have fun. Right, I agreed. I mean, we're not teenagers. We should be secure enough in our marriage to laugh off something so innocent. But even as I said it, I noticed that Elliot had been different all week. He was polite but distant, going through the motions of our daily routine without his usual warmth. When Lucy asked him to help with her math homework, something he normally loved doing, he seemed distracted and short-tempered. Is Daddy mad at Mommy? Lucy asked me one evening after Elliot had gone to bed early again. No, sweetheart, I assured her. Daddy's just tired from work. Everything's fine. But everything wasn't fine, and I was starting to realize that this wasn't going to blow over as easily as I'd expected. Elliot's reaction was more serious than I'd anticipated, and our friend's support, while validating, wasn't helping repair the growing distance between my husband and me. Still, I maintained that I'd done nothing wrong. It had been a game, a dare, a moment of harmless fun that he was choosing to turn into a crisis. If he wanted to be hurt and jealous over nothing, that was his problem to work through, not mine to fix. 2 weeks after the incident at the pub, I decided it was time to get our social life back on track. Elliot was still being distant and moody, barely engaging with me or Lucy beyond basic necessities. His mother Penny had called twice, which was unusual, and I could tell from his hushed conversations that she was filling his head with negative thoughts about me. We need to show everyone that we're fine, I told Elliot on Friday morning. Emma's having people over tomorrow night, and we should go. It'll be good for us to get out together.
Yeah.
He looked up from his coffee with an expression I couldn't quite read. I don't think that's a good idea, Rowena. Why not? Because you're still sulking about something that happened 2 weeks ago. I tried to keep my tone light, but I was getting frustrated with his continued coldness. Elliot, this is getting ridiculous. Our friends think you're being completely unreasonable. Our friends, he repeated slowly. Have you been discussing our marriage with them?
Yeah.
I've been defending you, actually, I said, which was partially true. I had been defending him, explaining that he was just going through a sensitive phase, that he wasn't usually so insecure and jealous. But they're starting to think you're being controlling.
Yeah.
That evening, I posted a photo of Elliot and me from our wedding anniversary last year. with a caption about my amazing husband and how secure couples can laugh about anything. I tagged him and added heart emojis, hoping to signal to our social circle that we were working through his jealousy issues.
Yum.
When Saturday night came, I spent extra time getting ready. I wanted to look confident and happy, to show everyone that I wasn't going to let Elliot's mood bring me down. He reluctantly agreed to come but barely spoke during the car ride to Emma's house.
Yum.
The evening started well enough. Our usual crowd was there, plus a few other couples I knew from around town. Everyone seemed determined to act normal, though I caught a few people glancing between Elliot and me as if waiting for drama.
Yum.
About an hour in, Jordan suggested we play some games again. I saw Elliot's jaw tighten, but I wasn't going to let his anxiety control our entire social life. Great idea, I said enthusiastically. What should we play? Emma suggested charades, but Vince, who had been uncharacteristically quiet all evening, proposed truth or dare again. Come on, it was fun last time. Well, mostly fun. I could feel the tension in the room spike, but I refused to back down. I'm game if everyone else is. Elliot stood up abruptly. I think I'll sit this one out. Oh, come on, Greg called out. Don't be a spoilsport, Elliot. It's just for fun. Yeah, Emma added with a laugh. What's the worst that could happen? The comment was clearly a reference to our previous game, and I saw several people exchange glances. I felt a surge of embarrassment and anger that Elliot was making everyone walk on eggshells around us. Elliot, please, I said firmly. Just play along, for once. He looked at me for a long moment, then sat back down without a word. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched in his lap. The first few rounds were deliberately tame, as if everyone was trying to avoid anything that might trigger another incident. But as the drinks flowed and the mood loosened, the dares became more playful again. When it was Vince's turn, he chose dare, and Emma challenged him to kiss the person in this room you'd most like to be stranded on a desert island with. Without hesitation, he looked directly at me. Well, that's easy. The room went dead silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd react, how Elliot would react. This was my chance to defuse the situation, to choose my husband, to show everyone that our marriage was solid. Instead, I felt a rebellious surge of anger at being put in this position by Elliot's oversensitivity. I'm flattered, I said with a laugh, and leaned in to give Vince a quick peck on the cheek, but he turned his head at the last second, and our lips met instead. The kiss lasted longer than I'd intended, maybe because I was proving a point, maybe because the alcohol had lowered my inhibitions, maybe because I was tired of walking on eggshells around my husband's insecurities. When we broke apart, the room was completely silent, except for the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. Elliot was standing again, his face pale but his voice steady. I'm going home, he said quietly. Elliot, wait, I started, but he was already walking toward the door. Don't, he said without turning around. Just don't. After he left, the party continued, but the mood was strained. Our friends rallied around me, assuring me that I'd done nothing wrong, that Elliot was being unreasonable and controlling, that no secure husband would react so dramatically to harmless fun between friends. He's trying to isolate you, Emma said seriously, making you feel guilty for having friends and being social. That's a red flag, Ro. I nodded, feeling validated by their support. They were right. I was just being myself, just enjoying time with friends, just refusing to be controlled by jealousy and insecurity. But when I got home that night, I found a note on the kitchen table in Elliot's handwriting. I'm staying at Mark's for a few days. We need some space to think about what we both want from this marriage. For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt a real stab of fear. This was escalating beyond what I'd expected, and I wasn't sure how to get things back under control. Waking up alone in our bed the next morning felt surreal. Elliot had never left before, not in 8 years of marriage. Even during our worst fights, we'd always worked things out by bedtime. But his note was still on the kitchen table, and his overnight bag was gone from the closet. Lucy came downstairs asking where Daddy was, and I had to think quickly. He's helping Uncle Mark with some projects, I told her, trying to sound casual. He'll be back soon. But as the day wore on, I started to worry. This wasn't like Elliot. He was usually the one pushing for us to talk through problems, not the one running away from them. His dramatic exit was starting to feel less like a tantrum and more like something serious. I called him twice, but both calls went straight to voicemail. I texted asking when he was coming home, but got no response. By evening, I was genuinely concerned. That's when his mother called. Rowena, Penny's voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. I think we need to talk. If this is about last night, Penny, I think Elliot is blowing things way out of proportion. Are you? She interrupted. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you publicly humiliated my son. Twice. I felt my defenses rise immediately. It was just a game, Penny. Just friends having fun. I don't understand why everyone is making such a big deal about this. Because it is a big deal, Rowena. You kissed another man in front of your husband and your friends. You posted it on social media. And when Elliot tried to tell you how it made him feel, you dismissed him and did it again. I didn't do it again, I protested. Last night was completely different. Vince turned his head at the last second. Oh, please. Penny's voice was sharp now. Don't insult my intelligence. I've seen the videos, Rowena, both of them. Videos? Plural? What videos? Emma posted another story last night, before Elliot left. You can see exactly what happened, and it wasn't an accident. My heart sank. I'd been so focused on the aftermath that I hadn't even thought to check social media. Sure enough, Emma had posted a short video of the second kiss, and this one looked even worse than the first. You could see me leaning in deliberately, see the kiss lasting several seconds, see Elliot's face in the background, devastated and humiliated. Penny, I know it looks bad, but it looks bad because it is bad, she said firmly. And if you can't see that, then I understand why my son needed space to think. After she hung up, I stared at the video for a long time. From this angle, with this context, I could see how it might be misinterpreted. But misinterpreted was the key word. These people didn't understand the dynamics of our friend group, didn't understand that this was just how we all interacted, didn't understand that it meant nothing. I decided to take control of the narrative before things got more out of hand. I posted a long Facebook status explaining the situation. Feeling confused and hurt tonight. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who judge you most harshly. Marriage should be built on trust and security, not jealousy and control. When your partner tries to dictate how you interact with friends or makes you feel guilty for being social and fun, that's not love, that's possession. I'm grateful for friends who see me for who I really am and don't try to change me. #authenticity, #friendship, #marriage, struggles. The response was immediate and overwhelmingly supportive. Friends commented with heart emojis and messages of support, saying things like, "You deserve better," and "Don't let anyone dim your light," and "Red flags, girl, red flags." But not everyone was supportive. Elliot's brother Mark commented simply, "There are always two sides to every story," and my own mother called within an hour. "Rowena, honey, I'm worried about you," she said. "This post, it doesn't sound like you." "What do you mean?" "I'm just being honest about what I'm going through." "But sweetheart, you kissed another man, twice, in public." "I don't understand how that's Elliot's fault." I felt frustrated that even my own mother wasn't understanding the situation. "Mom, it was just a game, just a dare. It didn't mean anything, and Elliot is making it into something it's not." "But honey, how do you think it made him feel? If your father had kissed another woman in front of me and all our friends." "That's different," I said quickly. "Dad would never do that because he's not fun like I am. But that doesn't mean I should have to stop being myself just because Elliot is insecure." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Rowena, I love you, but I think you need to really think about this, about how your actions affected your husband and your family." After she hung up, I felt more alone than I had since this whole thing started. Even the people who were supposed to be on my side were questioning me, making me doubt myself. But I knew I was right. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. This was just Elliot being dramatic and trying to control me through guilt and manipulation. The next morning, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, a professional-sounding woman introduced herself as Sarah Chen from a family law firm. "Mrs. Greaves, I'm calling on behalf of my client, Elliot Greaves. He's asked me to contact you about scheduling a consultation to discuss your marital situation." My blood ran cold. A consultation for what? To discuss the possibility of legal separation and custody arrangements for your daughter. The world seemed to tilt sideways. He's talking to a lawyer over this? "Mrs. Greaves, I'd recommend you seek your own legal counsel. We'll be in touch soon with some dates for mediation." After she hung up, I sat in my empty kitchen, staring at my phone. This had gone too far, way too far. Over a stupid kiss, a meaningless dare, a moment of fun that I'd already explained meant nothing. But apparently, to Elliot, it meant everything. The lawyer's call changed everything. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Elliot being oversensitive or needing a few days to cool off. This was about my marriage, my home, my daughter. This was real. I immediately called Elliot, and for the first time in days, he answered. Elliot, what the hell? A lawyer, really? His voice was calm, which somehow made it worse. Rowena, I tried to talk to you, multiple times. You made it clear that you don't think you did anything wrong, and that my feelings don't matter. That's not, I started, but he continued. I've been doing a lot of thinking this week, about our marriage, about respect, about what I'm willing to accept. And I've realized that I can't stay in a relationship where my partner publicly humiliates me and then tells me I'm wrong for being hurt. Publicly humiliates. I felt my anger rising. Elliot, it was a kiss. A stupid, meaningless kiss during a game. You're acting like I had an affair. Weren't you? His voice was still quiet, but there was steel in it now. Because from where I'm sitting, you've kissed another man twice in public, dismissed my feelings about it, posted on social media about how I'm controlling and possessive, and shown no remorse whatsoever. What would you call that? I was speechless for a moment. When he laid it out like that, it sounded worse than it was. But he was missing the context, missing the nuance, missing the fact that it was all just fun and games. I would call it living my life, I said finally. I would call it not letting jealousy and insecurity control my friendships and my social life. Okay, he said simply. Then I guess we want different things from marriage. Elliot, wait, but he'd already hung up. Over the next week, I tried everything I could think of to fix this. I called him repeatedly, sent long texts explaining my perspective, even showed up at Mark's house where he was staying. But Elliot was different now, resolved in a way I'd never seen before. I'm not trying to punish you, Rowena, he told me when I cornered him in Mark's driveway. I'm just protecting myself and Lucy from a situation that's become toxic. Toxic? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Our marriage is toxic because I played a game at a party? Our marriage is toxic because you can't acknowledge that your actions hurt me, he said. Because you've turned this into me being the problem instead of taking any responsibility for your choices. What choices, Elliot? What am I supposed to take responsibility for? He looked at me for a long moment. For kissing Vince, for doing it again after I told you how it made me feel, for posting about our problems on social media, for telling our friends and family that I'm controlling and insecure instead of admitting that maybe, just maybe, you crossed a line. I stared at him, feeling frustrated and misunderstood. I was just having fun, Elliot. I was just being myself. I'm sorry if that threatens you, but I'm not going to apologize for who I am. He nodded slowly. I know, and that's why this isn't going to work. The legal process moved faster than I'd expected. Within 2 weeks, I had my own lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia, who assured me that Elliot's case was weak and that his claims of emotional infidelity would never hold up in court. He's hurt and angry, she told me during our first meeting. But hurt feelings aren't grounds for divorce. We'll push back hard on his claims and make sure you get fair custody and financial support. I felt better having Patricia on my side, someone who understood that Elliot was being dramatic and vindictive. But then she asked to see any evidence he might have. Social media posts, text messages, anything that might be used against me. As we went through everything together, I started to see how it might look from the outside. The Instagram videos, my Facebook post about marriage being about trust and not control, text messages between Vince and me that were friendly but could be misinterpreted, photos from various group outings where Vince and I were standing close together or laughing. This isn't great, Patricia admitted. It's not illegal, but it paints a picture of someone who wasn't prioritizing their marriage. But I was prioritizing my marriage, I protested. I was trying to keep things fun and social. I was trying not to let his jealousy isolate us from our friends. I understand that, Rowena. But perception matters in family court. And the perception here is of a wife who is more concerned with her social life than her husband's feelings. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, Elliot and I were supposed to work out temporary custody arrangements for Lucy. She'd been staying with me during the week and spending weekends with Elliot at Mark's house. But I could tell the situation was confusing and upsetting for her. When is Daddy coming home? She asked me almost every night. I don't know, sweetheart, I'd tell her. Daddy and Mommy are working through some grown-up problems right now. But the truth was, I was starting to realize that Daddy might not be coming home at all. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I'd made a terrible mistake. The family courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, but somehow that made everything feel more intense, more personal. I sat at a table with Patricia, trying to project confidence while my stomach churned with anxiety. Across the aisle, Elliot sat with his lawyer, looking calm and composed in a way that unnerved me. Over the past month, as we'd prepared for this hearing, more details had emerged that I hadn't expected. Elliot's legal team had been thorough. They'd collected social media posts, text messages, witness statements from that night at the pub, even testimony from Lucy's teacher about changes in her behavior since our separation. Your Honor, Elliot's lawyer began, this case is about more than just a kiss at a party. It's about a pattern of behavior that shows a fundamental disrespect for the marriage and for Mr. Greaves as a partner. I wanted to object, to explain that it wasn't disrespect. It was just me being social and fun. But Patricia had coached me to stay quiet unless directly addressed by the judge. The lawyer continued, presenting evidence I'd forgotten existed. Screenshots of my Facebook post calling Elliot controlling and possessive. Text messages between Vince and me that, taken out of context, looked more intimate than they'd felt at the time. Testimony from other people at the party who'd witnessed both incidents. But the worst part was when they called Lucy's teacher to testify about the changes in her behavior, how she'd become withdrawn and anxious, how her grades had slipped, how she'd asked repeatedly if her parents were getting divorced. Greaves, the teacher said gently. Lucy has been very concerned about her family situation. She's mentioned multiple times that her parents are mad at each other and that she doesn't understand why Daddy had to move out. I felt tears prick my eyes as I listened to how my 7-year-old daughter was processing our separation. This wasn't what I'd wanted. None of this was what I'd wanted. When it was my turn to testify, I tried to explain my perspective as clearly as possible. Your Honor, I never intended to hurt anyone, I said, my voice shaking slightly. The kiss was part of a game, a dare. It lasted maybe 5 seconds and meant absolutely nothing. I love my husband, and I would never do anything to deliberately damage our marriage. Greaves, the judge said, looking at me over her glasses. Can you help me understand why, after your husband expressed that this behavior hurt him, you engaged in similar behavior again? I felt trapped by the question. How could I explain that I'd felt pressured by our friends, that I'd been trying to prove that Elliot was being unreasonable, that I'd wanted to show everyone our marriage was strong enough to handle a little harmless fun? I thought if I showed that it didn't mean anything, that we could all just laugh about it and move on, I said finally. I didn't realize how much it was affecting him. In the social media posts about your husband being controlling, my face burned with embarrassment. I was frustrated. I felt like my friends and I were being judged for just having fun, and I reacted emotionally. The judge nodded, making notes. When Patricia presented my case, she emphasized that I was a good mother, that I'd never had an affair, that Elliot was overreacting to innocent social interactions. But I could see in the judge's expression that the damage was done. The evidence painted a picture of someone who'd prioritized her social life over her marriage, who'd dismissed her husband's legitimate concerns, who'd publicly embarrassed him and then blamed him for being hurt. When Vince testified, reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable, he confirmed that the kisses had happened, that they'd been part of games, but that he'd felt uncomfortable with the situation and regretted his participation. Mr. Callow, Elliot's lawyer asked, in your opinion, did Mrs. Greaves seem concerned about her husband's feelings during these incidents? Vince glanced at me apologetically before answering. She seemed more focused on proving a point, I guess, like she was trying to show that Elliot was being unreasonable. The final blow came when Elliot himself testified. He was calm, articulate, and devastating. Your Honor, I don't believe my wife is a bad person, he said, but I do believe she's lost sight of what marriage means. When I tried to tell her that her actions were hurtful, she dismissed my feelings and made me the villain in our story. She turned our private problems into public entertainment and painted me as controlling for having boundaries. Mr. Greaves, what are you seeking from this court? I want joint custody of our daughter, with primary residence with me, he said steadily. I want Lucy to have stability and to be protected from the conflict that seems to follow this situation. And I want to end a marriage that has become toxic for all of us. The judge took a recess to consider everything she'd heard. I sat in the hallway with Patricia, feeling numb and disconnected from everything happening around me. How do you think it went? I asked. Patricia's expression was grim. Not well, Rowena. The evidence is compelling, and your husband presented himself very well. The judge seemed sympathetic to his position. When we reconvened, the judge's decision was swift and decisive. This court finds that while Mrs. Greaves did not engage in a physical affair, her behavior constituted emotional infidelity and showed a pattern of disrespect toward her marriage and her husband. The evidence shows that she prioritized her social relationships over her marital relationship and, when confronted about this, chose to blame her husband rather than examine her own actions. My heart sank as she continued. Given the testimony about the child's emotional distress and the ongoing conflict between the parents, this court awards primary custody to Mr. Greaves, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Greaves until such time as she can demonstrate a commitment to prioritizing her daughter's well-being over social conflicts. Supervised visitation. The words hit me like a physical blow. I wouldn't be able to see my own daughter without a court-appointed supervisor present. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court grants Mr. Greaves' petition for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences and emotional abandonment. As the gavel came down, I felt the full weight of what had just happened. My marriage was over. My daughter would be living with her father. I would be supervised when I saw her, treated like a potential threat to my own child's well-being. All because of a kiss. All because of a game. All because I'd refused to admit that maybe, just maybe, I'd been wrong. I watched Elliot gather his papers and speak quietly with his lawyer. He looked relieved but not triumphant, tired but resolved. When our eyes met across the courtroom, I saw no anger there anymore, just sadness and finality. As I left the courthouse that day, walking to my car alone, while Elliot left with Lucy and his family, I finally understood what I'd lost. Not just because of 2 kisses at parties, but because of everything that came after. Because I'd chosen my pride over my marriage, my social life over my family, being right over being loving. The game was over, and I was the only one who'd lost. Mena was the only one who'd lost. 3 months later, I still live in our house, now just my house, and see Lucy every other weekend with a supervisor present. Elliot has started dating someone new, a teacher from his school who Lucy apparently adores. Our old friend group has mostly disbanded. Some chose sides. Others just drifted away from the drama. I tell myself it was all just a misunderstanding, that Elliot overreacted, that the judge was biased. But late at night, when the house is quiet and empty, I sometimes wonder if everyone else saw something I couldn't or wouldn't see. Maybe it really was just a game. But games have consequences too, and some prices are higher than you realize until it's too late to pay them. Stwedino, October 13th, 2025, 12 hours 49 minutes and 2 seconds.